When Australia began its massive fencing projects, it was embarking on one of the most ambitious and audacious undertakings in its history. The scale was almost unimaginable, thousands of kilometers of wire and posts stretching across some of the harshest, most remote terrain on Earth. The world watched with a mix of awe and disbelief. Newspapers from London to New York ran stories about the great Australian fences, marveling at the sheer determination and, to some, the apparent folly of the idea. The idea of fencing a continent seemed absurd, like trying to corral the wind or draw a line across infinity. To outsiders, it was a spectacle, a grand experiment bordering on the impossible. Outsiders saw a comical attempt to tame the wild, a quixotic struggle against nature itself. They joked about Australians trying to fence in kangaroos or keep out the endless sky. But for Australians, these fences were a matter of survival. They weren't just lines on a map, they were lifelines, built to protect precious crops and livestock from relentless threats. The laughter from abroad missed the desperation on the ground. Drought, plagues of rabbits, and wild dogs threatened to destroy entire communities. For many, the fence was the only hope left. For farmers, the fences were not a joke. They were a last stand against forces threatening their livelihoods. Every post driven into the earth was an act of defiance, a statement of hope. These barriers weren't born from arrogance but from vulnerability and necessity. They were built by hands calloused from hard labor, by people who knew what was at stake. While the world chuckled, the fences quietly transformed the land. They carved new boundaries, reshaped ecosystems, and altered the rhythms of life for people and animals alike. They became symbols of stubbornness and resilience, monuments to the grit and determination of those who refused to give in to the land's challenges, but also of a deeper, overlooked story. One of unintended consequences and quiet transformation, unfolding year after year. The real punchline, as decades passed, was not funny at all. The fences, meant to save, sometimes brought new problems, dividing habitats and changing the land in ways no one foresaw. The fences were changing Australia in ways no one expected. Wildlife found their ancient paths blocked, and the balance of nature began to shift. And the consequences would be profound, echoing across generations and forever altering the story of the land and its people. Australia's great fences were built out of necessity, not spectacle. In a land of vast distances and harsh extremes, survival often depended on bold, sweeping solutions. The fences that now stretch for thousands of kilometers across the continent are not just relics of the past. They are monuments to a time when the stakes were nothing less than the future of Australian agriculture. Farmers faced relentless threats: native dingoes, apex predators with a taste for livestock, and invasive rabbits whose numbers exploded beyond control. Both animals, in their own way, threatened the livelihoods of those who worked the land. Dingoes, clever and deadly, devastated sheep flocks overnight. A single dingo could kill dozens of sheep in a frenzy, leaving devastation in its wake. For graziers, every howl in the night was a reminder of the constant danger lurking just beyond the fence line. The dingo fence was conceived to keep these predators out of the fertile southeast, protecting the wool industry that was the backbone of the nation's economy. Stretching over 5,600 kilometers, it became one of the longest structures in the world, a testament to human determination. Meanwhile, rabbits, introduced from Europe for sport, multiplied into a plague of millions. They stripped the land bare, devouring crops and native plants, and their relentless burrowing caused widespread erosion, turning once productive fields into wastelands. The rabbit-proof fence aimed to halt their westward march, a desperate attempt to draw a line against an unstoppable tide. It was a feat of engineering, stretching over 3,000 kilometers, and it became a symbol of the struggle to control nature. These fences were economic lifelines, massive investments to control animal populations and secure agriculture. Building and maintaining them required enormous effort, with teams of workers patrolling the lines, repairing damage, and ensuring the barriers held firm. The logic was simple: protect sheep and crops, exclude dingoes and rabbits. Behind the fences, farmers hoped for security, stability, and a chance to prosper in a land that could be unforgiving. It was a brute force solution to a problem threatening Australia's prosperity. The fences cut through deserts, forests, and grasslands, reshaping the landscape in the name of progress. For those on the land, fencing was survival. It was the difference between hope and ruin, between a future and a failed dream. Every post driven into the earth was an act of defiance against the forces of nature. But the consequences of picking winners and losers would echo far beyond the farm. The fences didn't just keep animals out, they divided ecosystems, altered migration patterns, and changed the balance of life across the continent. The fences were more than barriers, they were lines drawn in the sand of a fragile continent. They marked the boundary between human ambition and the wild, unpredictable forces of nature. And they set the stage for an ecological upheaval, the full consequences of which would only become clear with time. To grasp the impact of Australia's fences, you have to understand their scale. The dingo fence stretches over 5,600 kilometers, longer than London to New York. It's a managed border, patrolled and repaired across deserts, hills, and scrub. The rabbit-proof fence, once over 3,200 kilometers, was another feat of endurance and engineering. These aren't just lines on a map, they're physical barriers that have reshaped the continent. Maintaining them is a relentless task, demanding constant vigilance. Together, these fences and countless smaller ones form a web of division across Australia. Their total length is staggering, far surpassing the world's roads. For over a century, they've dictated the movement of life, big and small. The fences are silent, ever present, and their legacy is written into the land itself. But their true impact would only become clear with time. At first glance, the fences seemed like a brilliant solution. Sheep were finally safe from predators, and the wool industry flourished across Australia's vast rural landscapes. Farmers celebrated as their flocks grew, and the country's economy benefited from the booming trade in wool. The fences, stretching for thousands of kilometers, became a symbol of human ingenuity and control over nature. But as time passed, scientists and ecologists began to notice something troubling. The fences, while protecting livestock, were quietly changing the land in ways no one had anticipated. The dingo fence didn't just keep out predators like dingoes, it split the continent into two distinct ecological worlds. On one side, the absence of dingoes set off a chain reaction that no one had foreseen. Without their natural predators, kangaroo and goat populations exploded, grazing relentlessly on the fragile vegetation. The land, once lush and green, began to suffer under the pressure. As the plants disappeared, the soil lost its anchor. Erosion set in, and the landscape grew increasingly barren, unable to recover from the constant grazing. This is what ecologists call a trophic cascade. Remove a top predator, and the entire food web begins to unravel, with consequences rippling through every level of the ecosystem. The result was a landscape out of balance, where native plants struggled to survive, and the environment became increasingly inhospitable. The safe side of the fence, once thought to be a sanctuary, became a stark case study in unintended consequences. Desertification, not protection, was the legacy. Meanwhile, on the dingo side of the fence, a very different story unfolded. Here, ecosystems remained vibrant and balanced. Dingoes kept herbivore numbers in check, allowing native plants to thrive and supporting a rich diversity of life. The fence, unintentionally, became one of the world's largest ecological experiments, a living demonstration of the vital role predators play in maintaining the health of entire landscapes. It proved beyond doubt that predators are not just dangerous, they are essential to the balance and resilience of nature. The solution to one problem had created a much bigger one, with consequences that rippled across generations. The fences, built to save the land and its livestock, were quietly destroying the very environment they were meant to protect. The lesson is clear: nature's balance is far more delicate and interconnected than we ever imagined. And the true cost of meddling with that balance was far higher and more lasting than anyone could have guessed. Australia's fence dilemma is a global warning. Around the world, fences fragment landscapes and disrupt wildlife. In Africa, veterinary fences block ancient migrations, leading to mass die-offs. In North America, border walls isolate species, threatening their survival. Fences create winners and losers, favoring some animals while dooming others. They disrupt migration, predation, and the flow of life itself. Australia's story is a stark reminder. Drawing lines on the land has consequences that ripple for generations. The world is only beginning to reckon with the true cost of its barriers. As the damage from physical fences became clear, hope turned to technology. virtual fencing emerged, roadside sensors that flash lights and sounds to deter wildlife from crossing in front of cars. Early trials were promising. Wildlife collisions dropped dramatically in some areas. Conservationists and governments saw a humane, adaptable solution. Unlike wire fences, virtual systems only activate when needed, allowing animals to move freely otherwise. The idea spread quickly, hailed as a breakthrough for coexistence. It was a symbol of smarter, more compassionate management. For a moment, it seemed Australia had found a way to protect both people and wildlife. But the reality would prove more complicated. The promise of virtual fencing soon unraveled. Rigorous studies found little evidence that the technology worked as hoped. Australian wildlife often ignored the cues, or reacted unpredictably. The systems, designed for deer overseas, didn't translate to kangaroos and wombats. Worse, drivers felt falsely secure, sometimes speeding up in protected zones. The technology addressed the wrong problem: animal behavior, not human caution. A major government inquiry advised against further funding. The lesson was clear: there are no shortcuts in wildlife management. Good intentions and gadgets can't replace real understanding of ecology. The search for balance between people and nature was back to square one, and the fences, real and virtual, remained a stubborn challenge. Even when fences come down, their impact lingers. Animals remember old boundaries, passing this knowledge to their young. These ghost fences persist for generations, shaping movement and behavior long after the wire is gone. In Africa, elephants avoid former fence lines decades after removal. In Australia, removing the dingo fence wouldn't instantly restore balance. Kangaroos and dingoes are conditioned by generations of separation. The damage is not just physical, but cultural and ecological. Ghost fences remind us that some wounds on the land are slow to heal. Our actions echo far beyond the life of any barrier. Today Australia faces a hard truth. There are no easy answers. The dingo fence, once a symbol of protection, is now seen as a driver of ecological harm. High-tech fixes have failed to deliver. Can we design fences that protect both agriculture and wildlife? Or is the very idea of fencing at odds with a healthy ecosystem? Should we reintroduce dingoes, risking conflict with farmers, to restore balance? The journey from wire to virtual fences has taught us that every action has consequences. The future depends on learning from the past, and finding a way to live as custodians, not conquerors of the land.